Snow was falling gently outside the little cafe that sat tucked inside a quiet, tree-lined park. The late afternoon light painted the sky in pale gold and silver, and every window of the cafe glowed with warmth against the cold world outside. Inside, the scent of cinnamon, roasted coffee beans, and something freshly baked filled the air. The music was soft, a piano tune that sounded like falling snowflakes. At the corner table, near the frosted glass, Isabella Harris sat alone, her long blonde hair tied neatly back, though a few strands had escaped and brushed against her cheek as she sipped her steaming cup of tea. She wore a wool coat the color of cream, simple yet elegant, and her polished boots tapped lightly on the wooden floor. Every movement she made seemed careful, practiced, graceful, deliberate, the kind of grace that comes from years of learning to hide nervousness under poise. Her eyes flicked toward the clock on the wall, then down to her watch. Not out of impatience, it was just habit. She had been on 4 blind dates in the last 3 months, each one a gentle reminder of how disconnected she felt from the idea of love. They were all the same, men who spoke about their jobs, their cars, their trips, their goals. Conversations that sounded like interviews, not connections. And though she tried to smile, to stay open, each time she walked away with a quiet ache in her chest, a small, hollow kind of disappointment. Her best friend had begged her to give it one more try. Come on, Issa, just one more. Maybe it's not about the right person. Maybe it's about the right moment, so here she was. Another cafe, another stranger, another chance she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. The bell above the door chimed, soft but clear. Isabella looked up instinctively. A man stepped inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing jeans, worn-in work boots, and a forest green flannel shirt beneath a thick coat. Nothing about him looked polished or styled, and yet he carried himself with a quiet steadiness like someone who was comfortable in his own skin. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his hands rough from work. He scanned the room until his eyes found hers. He gave a small nod, respectful, uncertain, before walking over. "Isabella?" he asked, his voice low and warm, carrying the calm of someone who didn't rush his words. She rose slightly, offering a smile. "Jason, right?" He nodded again. "Thanks for meeting me." They shook hands. His grip was firm but gentle. When they sat, the conversation began with the usual polite exchanges. Names, work, places they'd traveled, favorite coffee orders. Jason admitted, after a moment of fumbling, that he wasn't very good at small talk. "I'd rather just skip to something real," he said with a shy smile. That made her laugh softly. "That's refreshing," she said, taking another sip of her tea. He told her he was a carpenter, mostly custom furniture for local shops and homes. She found herself smiling politely. "That's rare these days," she said. "Working with your hands." He shrugged lightly. "It keeps me grounded. There's something about wood that reminds you to slow down. You can't rush it. It breaks if you do." She nodded, appreciating the sentiment but still feeling that familiar distance. She talked about her job, designing luxury clothing for a brand that catered to clients who measured worth by price tags. He listened attentively, asking a few thoughtful questions that most men never thought to ask. But still, as the minutes passed, she felt the same quiet disconnection forming between them. He was kind in a way that felt steady and unpretentious, but not what she was used to. And maybe that was exactly what unsettled her. She opened her mouth, preparing to gently end the date, when the door of the cafe suddenly swung open with a burst of cold air and a sound of hurried footsteps. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, came running in, cheeks pink from the chill, curls of golden hair spilling from under her knitted hat. She wore a fluffy pink coat and matching mittens, her laughter echoing like tiny bells. "Daddy!" she squealed, running straight toward Jason. Jason's face went pale. "Anna?" But before he could finish, the girl pointed directly at Isabella, eyes wide with excitement. "Daddy! That's her! That's the lady from your favorite story." The cafe fell silent for a moment. Isabella blinked, unsure what was happening. Jason looked utterly flustered, his hand awkwardly catching his daughter as she launched herself into his lap. "Anna," he said softly. "We talked about not interrupting, remember?" "But it's her," the girl insisted, tugging at his sleeve. "The lady with the sunshine hair?" Isabella's lips parted in surprise. "Sunshine hair?" she repeated, smiling despite herself. Anna nodded eagerly and dug into her coat pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper covered in colorful scribbles. She handed it proudly to Isabella. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, a man, a little girl, and a woman with bright yellow hair standing beneath a giant sun. "That's you," Anna said with complete confidence. "You're the lady from Daddy's story." Jason rubbed his forehead, mortified. "It's just a bedtime story I made up," he said quickly. "Something to help her sleep when she was scared. I might have described the lady a little too well." Isabella laughed softly, her heart warming in a way she hadn't expected. "And what does the Sunshine Lady do?" she asked Anna gently. "She makes the house warm," Anna said, "even when it's snowing outside." Jason's eyes flicked up to meet hers, uncertain, almost apologetic. But Isabella's expression softened. "That's a beautiful story," she said quietly. Jason smiled, embarrassed but touched. "I guess I can't compete with that." "Maybe not," Isabella teased lightly. "But it's a good story." And in that moment something inside her shifted. The date she had been ready to escape from turned into something tender, unexpected. They stayed a little longer. Jason told her how he built furniture from reclaimed wood, how every piece carried its own story. She told him about fashion design, about deadlines and sketches, and the loneliness that came with chasing perfection. When they finally stepped outside, snowflakes were falling in slow, graceful swirls. Anna skipped ahead of them, singing softly to herself. Jason looked over. "I hope this wasn't too strange," he said. She insisted on coming. I told her it was just a coffee, but she's persistent. Isabella smiled. "Persistent can be a good thing." "She gets that from her mom," Jason said quietly. They walked a few more steps in silence before Isabella asked gently, "What happened to her mom?" Jason's breath fogged the air. "She passed away, leukemia, and it was 2. It happened fast. One day we were a family of 3, and the next it was just us." Isabella's voice softened. "I'm so sorry," he nodded. "It's been hard, but Anna, she's the reason I keep going. I tell her stories because it's how I keep hope alive." They stopped near a frozen pond. Families were skating, laughter carrying in the cold air. Anna twirled in her pink coat, pretending to dance. "She really believes in your stories," Isabella said. Jason watched his daughter with quiet pride. "She believes in a lot of things. I wanted her to have someone to look up to, someone kind and gentle, someone who doesn't quit when things get hard." Isabella swallowed, her heart tightening. "That's a lot of faith for a story." "Maybe," Jason said softly. "But kids see truth in things adults forget." They stood there for a long moment. The world was still around them. Snow fell, soft and endless. Isabella looked at him then. Really looked. At the quiet steadiness in his eyes. At the hands that built things to last. And for the first time in years, she felt something that wasn't fear or disappointment. It was peace. Over the next few weeks, the world outside seemed to grow colder. But Isabella found warmth in places she hadn't expected. In quiet moments, in simple gestures. In the way Jason always listened without trying to fix everything. What had started as a one-time coffee became something gentle, unhurried. Jason began inviting her to visit his workshop on weekends, a small studio tucked behind his house with wide windows overlooking the woods. Inside, it smelled of pine and varnish, and sunlight filtered through in golden streaks that danced on the dust motes in the air. She would sit on a stool near the window, sipping cocoa while he worked, shaping pieces of raw wood into smooth forms with careful hands. Anna would be there too, usually on the floor with her crayons and coloring books, humming softly to herself while her father worked. Sometimes she'd bring Isabella a new picture, always with 3 figures under a bright sun. One afternoon, as Jason sanded the edge of a chair, Isabella asked softly, "Do you ever miss it? The life you had before?" He paused, brushing sawdust from his hands. "Every day," he admitted. "But missing it doesn't bring it back. So I build. I tell stories. I try to make beauty out of what's left." She nodded slowly, understanding more than she wanted to admit. "I guess we all do that in our own ways." Jason looked at her. "What do you build, Isabella?" She smiled faintly. "Dreams that don't belong to me. Dresses for people who never look twice at who made them. I used to think that was enough. But lately," she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Lately?" he prompted gently. "Lately, I think I'm missing something real." she said, eyes fixed on the sunlight. Something I can touch, not just imagine. Jason didn't respond with words. Instead, he handed her a small block of wood and a carving tool. Then make something, he said quietly. She laughed. Me? I can't even draw a straight line, he grinned. Then it'll be perfect. Imperfection is honest, and so she tried. Her lines were uneven, her carving hesitant, but Jason guided her hand, patient and kind. His touch was steady, his voice calm. For a moment, the world outside the workshop ceased to exist. When they finished, the block had turned into something small but beautiful, a wooden sun. For the Sunshine Lady, Jason said softly. She looked at it for a long moment, then smiled. You really tell that story a lot, don't you? It keeps her happy, he said, nodding toward Anna. But does it keep you happy? She asked. Jason didn't answer, but his silence said enough. That evening, as she drove home, Isabella couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he looked at his daughter like she was the only thing keeping him breathing, about how gentle his hands were with fragile things, about how his smile wasn't practiced, it just was. Days turned into weeks. And then into months. They weren't dating, not officially. There were no declarations, no promises, just shared meals, quiet laughter, and long conversations that stretched into the night. Sometimes she would catch Jason looking at her as though he wanted to say something but held it back, out of respect or fear, or both. And sometimes she caught herself wanting to reach for his hand but stopping, unsure what line she might be crossing. But Anna had no such hesitation. She adored Isabella with the pure, boundless love only a child could give. She would climb into her lap, braid her hair with glitter ribbons, and whisper secrets that made Isabella's heart ache with tenderness. One evening, when Isabella tucked Anna into bed while Jason was cleaning up downstairs, the little girl looked up and said softly, You know, Daddy smiles more now. Isabella brushed a strand of hair from Anna's face. He does? Anna nodded seriously. He used to be sad. He told me stories about the Sunshine Lady to feel better. But now he says he doesn't have to make up the story anymore. Isabella froze, her breath catching in her throat. Because, Anna added sleepily, she's real now. Isabella kissed her forehead gently. Go to sleep, sweetheart. But long after Anna had drifted off, Isabella sat beside her, staring out the window at the soft glow of the moon. She didn't know what scared her more, the idea of falling in love again or the idea that maybe she already had. A week later, Jason invited her and Anna to dinner at his place. It was simple, roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, and laughter echoing between the walls. He played old records while Anna danced barefoot on the rug. At one point, Jason reached out his hand to Isabella, and they danced too, slow, hesitant, almost like they were afraid to break the fragile magic that hung between them. Do you ever think about what comes next? She whispered, her hand resting against his chest. He looked down at her. Every day, he said quietly. But I don't want to rush it. I've learned that love isn't something you chase. It's something you build, and slow and steady. She smiled up at him. And what if I'm not very good at building? Then I'll teach you, he said, his thumb brushing her cheek. And just like that, her walls began to crumble. But love, no matter how gentle, always meets resistance from the world, from fear, from the past. It happened when she introduced him to her mother. Her mother was a woman of elegance and cold perfection, silver hair, diamond earrings, and an air of practiced superiority that filled every room she entered. When Isabella told her she was seeing someone, her mother had smiled thinly and said, Finally. Someone suitable, I hope? When Jason and Anna arrived for dinner, her mother's polite smile faltered for only a second, but Isabella noticed. Jason offered flowers, daisies simple and cheerful. Her mother accepted them with a nod that barely concealed disapproval. Dinner was quiet at first. Jason tried to be polite, answering her mother's questions with grace. But then came the moment that shattered the peace. So, her mother said, cutting her steak with precision, You build furniture for a living? Jason nodded. Yes, ma'am, she smiled tightly. That's quaint. And your daughter, she must keep you busy. She's my world, Jason said without hesitation. Isabella's mother leaned back, her voice calm but sharp. Of course. But tell me, Jason, what do you think you can really offer my daughter? She's worked her entire life for stability, refinement. I imagine your world is rather different. Silence filled the room like frost. Isabella's heart sank. Jason set down his fork slowly. You're right, he said quietly. It is different. But I think love doesn't care much about the world we come from. It only cares about the one we make together. Her mother's lips curved slightly, not in kindness. That's a lovely sentiment, but not everyone gets to live on poetry and promises. That was when Anna, sitting beside Jason, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. My daddy's stories aren't promises. They're true. Jason smiled sadly. Anna, sweetheart. Her mother sighed softly. How adorable. Isabella stood abruptly. Mother, that's enough. But Jason had already risen, gently taking Anna's hand. We should go, he said quietly. Jason, please, Isabella whispered. He looked at her, not angry, just deeply hurt. Anna thinks you're the princess from my stories, the one who brings light into our home. But I can't let her watch that light fade because someone thinks we're not enough. And then he walked out. Isabella followed them to the door, her throat tight, her chest aching. But the words wouldn't come. The door closed, and with it something inside her cracked. That night she stood by her window watching snow fall again. The world felt colder than it had in years. Days passed, then weeks. She threw herself into work, into sketches and deadlines and things that didn't require feeling. But nothing dulled the emptiness. Every time she picked up a pen, she saw Anna's smile. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jason's quiet disappointment, and on her desk, hidden beneath piles of fabric swatches, sat the small wooden sun he had helped her carve. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away. It had been 2 weeks since that dinner, and yet Isabella still woke each morning half expecting a message that never came. She told herself that if it was meant to be, he'd call, that if love was real, it would find its way back. But in the quiet moments, when the city lights blurred through, her window and the world seemed too still, and she admitted the truth she'd been running from. She had let something beautiful slip away. The fashion world spun on around her. Deadlines, fittings, new collection. But everything felt dull now, washed out like she was seeing life through glass. Her co-workers praised her designs, but the colors felt wrong. Too cold, too careful. Every evening she'd come home, make herself tea, and sit by the fireplace staring at that little wooden sun Jason had carved. Its surface was rough, imperfect, yet somehow more beautiful than any polished thing she'd ever owned. Sometimes, she'd trace the edges of it with her fingertips, remembering the way his hand had guided hers, and then, one afternoon, her mother came home earlier than usual. She walked into Isabella's office holding her coat and a strange expression, softer than usual, uncertain almost. My car broke down near the old bridge, she said, sounding almost flustered. A man stopped to help. A carpenter. His daughter thanked me for taking care of her daddy's sunshine. Isabella froze. Her heart seemed to stop mid-beat. His daughter? She whispered. Her mother nodded slowly. Charming little girl. Talked the entire time. Said her daddy tells stories about a lady with golden hair. She said her name was Anna. Isabella's throat tightened. You saw them? I did, her mother said softly. They live not far from the lake. He insisted on fixing the car for free. I asked him why. He said, because kindness keeps her memory alive. I didn't understand what he meant until the little girl said, He means Mommy. Her mother hesitated, then looked at Isabella with eyes that for once weren't cold. She reminded me of you, when you still believed that love could fix things. That night, Isabella didn't sleep. She sat awake until the first light of dawn brushed across her walls. And when the city began to stir, she grabbed her coat, her keys, and that small wooden sun, the one he'd made for her, and drove through the snow-dusted streets toward the lake. The drive was quiet, except for the hum of the engine and her heartbeat pounding in her ears. When she reached the little wooden house at the edge of the lake, her breath caught. The same workshop lights she remembered were glowing softly through the windows. She stood outside for a long time, the cold biting at her fingers, her heart trembling with fear and hope. Then she knocked. The door opened slowly. Jason stood there, surprise flickering in his eyes. His hair was a bit longer, his flannel sleeves rolled up, sawdust still clinging to his shirt. Isabella, he said, voice low. She held up the little sun in her hand, her eyes glistening. I was wrong, she whispered. I thought love was something you had to plan, something that had to fit neatly into your life. But I don't want perfect anymore. I just want real. I want the life we make, you, me, and Anna. Jason didn't speak right away. His eyes searched hers, soft but guarded. Why now? He finally asked. Because, she said quietly. I'm tired of stories that end too soon. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of pain melting into relief. I don't need an apology, he said gently. Just stay. And she did. When Anna saw her standing there, she squealed with joy and threw her little arms around Isabella's waist. You came back, she cried. Isabella knelt down, tears filling her eyes. Of course I did. I told you. Sunshine always finds its way home. That evening, the three of them sat by the fireplace, the sound of crackling wood and the smell of cocoa filling the small room. Anna drew pictures while Jason worked on a small bookshelf, and Isabella read aloud from one of Anna's storybooks. The simple quiet felt sacred, a piece she hadn't known she was missing until now. As days turned into weeks, the rhythm of their lives intertwined naturally. Isabella would stop by the workshop after work, bringing tea or dinner. Jason taught her how to sand wood, how to carve little shapes. Anna insisted that every new carving needed a sunshine touch. And slowly, the little family they'd once only dreamed of became something real. Months later, on a crisp spring afternoon, Anna stood on a small stage at her preschool's art event. She wore her favorite pink dress sprinkled with tiny stars, her curls tied back with a ribbon. When it was her turn, she stepped up to the microphone, holding a piece of paper in her trembling hands. My daddy tells stories about sawdust and stars, she began, her voice bright but shy. But my favorite story is about the lady with sunshine hair. She makes our house warm even when it's cold. And that's how I know I have two hands to hold. The audience clapped, some wiping away tears. Jason's eyes shimmered with pride. Isabella pressed her hand against her heart, overwhelmed by love. From the back of the room, a familiar voice spoke softly. My granddaughter has talent. Isabella turned and her mother was standing there. Dressed simply for once, her usual sharpness softened by something like humility. After the show, they all went back to Jason's home for dinner. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, laughter echoing against the walls. Her mother even smiled awkwardly when Anna offered her bread. At one point, her mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver butterfly hair clip. This was yours, she told Isabella quietly. You wore it the day you first went to school. I was too busy to notice how scared you were. Maybe I can make it up to her. She nodded toward Anna. Anna's face lit up as her grandmother clipped it into her curls. Now I'm fancy like Mommy, she giggled. Jason looked across the table at Isabella. You did it, he murmured. She smiled. We did. A year later, the wooden sign above their shop read The Story Nook and Cafe. Jason had built the shelves himself, each one perfectly imperfect. Isabella designed the cozy interior, warm lighting, soft chairs, small tables decorated with flowers and handmade mugs. Anna had her own little corner where every Monday she hosted story time with Anna, reading picture books to other children in her lucky pink dress. Her mother came often now, sometimes to read to the children, sometimes just to sit and watch. She'd even begun bringing cookies she baked herself, though she never admitted they came from a mix. Customers loved the place not just for its books or coffee, but for its heart, for the feeling that everything inside it had been touched by love. On one quiet evening after closing time, the three of them sat on the couch by the window. Snow was falling again outside, just like the day they met. Jason's arm rested around Isabella's shoulders. Anna curled up between them, fast asleep with her favorite book still in her lap. Isabella turned her head slightly, watching the snow. You know, she whispered, I used to think stories had to end perfectly. That love meant everything had to make sense. Jason smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And now? Now I think the best stories, she said softly, are the ones you never want to stop reading. He kissed her forehead. The ones you build together. Outside, the world was white and still. Inside, warmth glowed, laughter, love, and the quiet heartbeat of a family that had found each other when they least expected it. The day Isabella thought she regretted the blind date was the day her forever story began, and in that little wooden house by the lake, surrounded by sawdust sketches, and the sound of a child's laughter, they lived, not perfectly, but beautifully, ever after. Because some stories aren't about finding love. They're about choosing it again and again every single day.